when we had our prep call, I struggled figuring out where to even start with your introduction because you have so much depth to it. But I think what's really cool when you find out more about Andy is now that he's kind of on the second phase of his career of leaving his corporate role, it's really nice for him to be able to reflect back and be like, okay, how do you find the right company and the right culture? And he's got three kids. Two are twins in New York City, 2 years older than most you hear, and then one's in college at Notre Dame. So it's very relevant advice. But the thing that I liked about his story, which I temporarily forgot the portion of it, is he really didn't want a career in corporate America, didn't have like that was a passion of his and wanted to do something different until he realized he needed to change courses. So he'll tell that part of his story. But for the guy that didn't want a career in business or in corporate America, he ended up being the president of the company, which had about 20,000 employees. It's about $15 billion, like one of the largest, it is the largest staffing company out there. Who's hiring. Recruiting is a great job. If anyone wants to do recruiting, they are hiring. But it's just interesting how your career can evolve because your passions and your experience change. So Andy, like Hannah, can you do a better job of introducing yourself than I just did? And thank you for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah. And I'll try to do a better job, but I don't know. That was awfully nice. So we'll see. As Marcy said, I've got twin daughters who are 24 and a 20-year-old, and I am really hopeful that you're more apt to take my advice than they are. They tend to roll their eyes and ignore most of what I have to say, but I think some of what you're all talking about is pretty prevalent in our house. And as Marcy said, I've had a lot of time to reflect on my own career as well as just watching a lot of people thrive, and some people really struggle in work, and draw some conclusions about what some of the themes were there. So 24, 20 are my kids. We've got a dog named Leo. I'm now an empty nester living in Baltimore, Maryland. I've got my purple on for the Ravens tonight. They kick off in a couple hours. I don't know if there's any Buccaneers fans, but hoping the Ravens put a hurting on them. And as Marcy said, I left college not really knowing what I wanted to do, and had sort of this magical career and learned a lot along the way. But it's important for you to hear that I had no idea what I wanted to do at 22 and really probably at 32. And now at 55, I think I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. And what I have found, and one of the things I want to leave you with, is that's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun in getting to try some different things. And like Hannah said, who had no interest in supply chain and then got there and said, wow, this isn't what I thought. And I suspect works for a pretty cool company with a cool culture. That tends to be more important than the job or the job title. And one of the things I've found about my journey is I was super motivated by curiosity. So I never really cared about what job I did. I just wanted different and interesting assignments. And so at about 28, I stumbled upon this company called, at the time, Aerotech, which is now Allegis Group. And at the time, as Marcy said, I really didn't want a job in corporate America, but I needed to pay the rent. And I reluctantly started this job as a business analyst, was super intimidated because everybody at this company seemed really charismatic, really switched on. And I was a little bit introverted. I was behind the scenes. I was hired to be behind the scenes. And the first few years were fun. I liked the people. I liked the culture. It was really competitive. I'd grown up playing a lot of sports, and I liked the fact that every Wednesday we knew whether we were winning or losing, and we were part of a team. But I still sort of looked at it as a place where I was just biding my time while I figured out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I'll spare you the long version because I know there's some questions, but I kept getting asked to take on different assignments that I didn't ever feel ready for. But I felt like somebody believed in me, maybe more than I believed in myself. And I kept getting these cool opportunities to work with people I liked, solve interesting problems, and follow that curiosity. And lo and behold, probably 17, 18 years into my journey, I got asked to be the president of the whole thing. And I thought, gosh, why would you ask me? I was an English and philosophy major who didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't really think I wanted to get into business. And I realized that part of what had differentiated me, and I don't think I necessarily talked about this in a savage way, but I had taken all these different experiences and all these different assignments, and I'd just been exposed to so much of the company that suddenly my my experience and my interests were so much broader than most of the people that were considered for those assignments. So, one of the things I tell anyone who's starting out is be an N of one. Blaze your own path. You don't have to compete with everybody else. You can figure out your own way, and sometimes different is better than better. So I had such a different journey with a different background and a different way of seeing the company that I probably wasn't ready to take on that job, but I was probably more ready than anyone else, or I was less less ill-equipped than almost anyone. And like I said, it was a lot of fun. So hey, I'm thrilled to be here, and hope I can share some more things about my journey. I know there's some questions there.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thank you. We're going to have Ty ask the first question, but before you do, Ty, I want to emphasize what Andy's saying. So first of all, it is totally okay to not know exactly what you want to do, but you got to jump in and start somewhere. And to get the job, most people care about themselves. So if you're talking to somebody that you want the job, like put it in their language. Like, how can you help them? How will you add value to them? Or, like kind of make it easy for them to help you network, or make it easy for them to want to hire you. And then the other thing is that Andy's saying is that, he got to the president of this very large company, the job that most people would say I would dream for that job, because he continued to basically, in my terms, network and do a lot of different jobs within the company. And just every time he did it, he added value. And so he blazed his own trail to get to that position. And that's how you did it. So networking right now is because you want to get the job or the internship, but I'm telling you, these are the skills for life. And if you just realize like networking is not that hard, it's just asking a lot of questions, being clear about your goals, seeing how you can help them. It's really that simple and fun. So Andy, thank you. And Ty, do you want to ask the first question?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, Andy, thank you for taking the time to be here. But the first question I have is why is networking important for students today?
Yeah, thanks, Ty. It's great to be here, and maybe just start with what Marcy finished with. I hadn't really thought about all those assignments as networking opportunities, but they really were, and a lot of people had stayed in in the same business unit most of their career. I had a chance to build trust and build relationships across the business, and so I said a lot of the reason that I had the opportunity to take on the president role was because I had all these different experiences. But I think to Marcy's point, the networking aspect of it meant that people knew me and trusted me. And back to something that Hannah said, I was sort of leaning into my strengths. And so my brand became somebody that wasn't threatening. I wasn't there to try to take over a function. I was just there to help them out. And they kind of knew I was going to put things first. But let me back up and Ty, hit your question maybe more from the context of where you all are in finding a job. And I'll probably repeat a lot of what you've heard from Marcy and others through the process. But I'll share a quick story. One of the things that I've been doing since I retired from Allegis is I've been doing some teaching. And one of the classes that I've gotten to teach are engineering students who are getting a master's in engineering management at Duke. So these are super smart kids. They've forgotten more than I know about a lot of technical things. And one in particular, this guy, Johnny, who was a Chinese student, Chinese national, had designed a custom GPT to go take his resume and match it to every job he could find on Handshake. And not only did it tailor his resume to the Handshake job description, it wrote him a cover letter. So I met Johnny when he was in his third semester and he was just about to finish up. And part of the reason that he was at Duke was because he wanted to move to the US and he needed a job. And this degree was going to give him a STEM visa, but he had to find a job that would allow him to work in the US. And at this point, he had applied to over 1,100 jobs. All right. Think about that. Now he automated it. He figured out a cool way, but he was incredibly frustrated because very few of them had gotten back to him. It felt like a big black hole, and he wasn't alone. Most of the people that I met there had also kind of just been hitting handshake, hell west and crooked. And I sat down with him and just said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And he had a few things. He wanted to get into product. He wanted to use his technical background on the business side. But I just started to ask him about companies that he was interested in. And we went into his LinkedIn. We just pulled it up. And lo and behold, a few of the companies that he wanted to get into, past graduates of the program worked there. Now, he was hesitant because he didn't know them. He knew of them. He had connected to them at some point, or maybe he was second degree connected. But I just said, "Hey, reach out to him." And he told me they're not hiring and he's already gone through the official process. And I just said, "Johnny, all you have to do is say, 'Hey, I'm a master's student at Duke. I'd love to hear about your journey. I'm really curious about your company. Would you spend 10 minutes with me?'" Within 2 weeks, one of those people had passed him on to somebody who hired him. And within 2 weeks, he had a job. Now, I'm not here to say handshake isn't fine and you shouldn't spend some time, making sure you're checking it. But I am here to say most of you will find your job through networking. It's how you're going to find your job. It's how you're going to evolve and advance in your career. And this is probably the advice that my kids were reluctant to take. Couple things. It's not weird to reach out to somebody. I get requests to connect on LinkedIn to the tune of probably about 15 a day, and I accept almost all of them. It's the way LinkedIn is. You want to expand your network, and I'm there to make sure I've got a broader reach. So don't hesitate. Don't feel like, I don't know, is it going to be met strangely? The second thing I would tell you is that the conversation or the note that Johnny sent is super low risk. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is that person's going to ignore him and probably forget about it in no time. So you have almost nothing to lose by shooting something out. Leverage your network to figure out, how do I network? So rather than me getting something cold, if I get a note from Marcy saying, "Hey, I've got a really good friend. I think you'd like him. Could you spend 15 minutes? He wants to explore a life in staffing." 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to respond because A, I trust Marcy and I like her. And B, I don't want to let her down. She's put her name on this person and I'm going to feel some sense of obligation. So you can warm things up. And in the end, to get on that networking call and say, "Do you have a job?" You can say, "I'd love to learn about your industry," or "I'd love to hear about your career path," or "I've heard great things about your company and I want to learn more about the culture." Something that gets them talking, because I think Marcy said this a minute ago. People love to tell you what they're up to and they're excited about their work. And probably the key thing is you're not there to sell you as much as you are to listen and understand what's out there. And you never know when that's going to translate into a job opportunity. So huge fan of networking. And that's probably the handful of things I'd underline about that.
That's awesome. And Katie, before you get to your question, you mind if I jump in real quick? I feel like, Andy, what you're making such a simple point, but it's so good for this group because you have, first of all, it's proven that we have a community that all want to help you. Like 100%, you guys are tapping into the tip of the iceberg, and we have so many more relationships and connections we'll make. You have to kind of make it easy for us to know who we should introduce you to. So that's why a little more detail is helpful. But as Andy's talking, it's like, you don't have to entertain them. So too often you get on a networking call and now you're with this like CEO and you're like, why don't you know what to talk about? Just let them do all the talking. They've had this, you're one of 15 calls this week. They know how to mentor college kids that don't know exactly what they want to do. But the little bit savage is asking questions of pure curiosity. Like, well, tell me about your career path. Like, how did you get there? How did you know? Or was there a time that you were in college that you really were undecided? Or like, I know part of Hannah's story and she didn't share it, but Carrie told me, but she didn't really want to go to California. Like that wasn't on the short list, but Apple offered this amazing job and now she's in California. So part of your career unfolds in front of you. So again, on these network calls, simplify it. They want to help you, just be loaded with some questions. All right. So Katie, do you want to ask Andy a question?
Yeah. Hi, Andy. Good to see you again. Thanks for getting on. My question for you is, what are like the most effective strategies for prepping for informational interviews, networking calls, and even conversations with like your family friends when you're exploring career opportunities and aren't entirely sure which path you want to take?
Yeah, so great to see you, Katie. And as you heard from me earlier, I realize it's getting dark here. I'm outside, so apologies that I think we are at sunset right now at 6:28 or 6:30. So you heard me say earlier, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I think that's a strength. I think that gives you the ability to really navigate and learn and sample and try things. I think we have this model in our head that we're supposed to think through, know exactly what we want, and then go do it. And all the research about fulfillment in your career is kind of the opposite, which is you don't know what you don't know until you get out there and you try some different things. And as Marcy said a little while ago, it's not a year until you're a year or two in where you're like, wow, this is something I'm pretty good at, and they'll pay me to do it. And in the end, I like doing it. Like that's the Venn diagram you want. But back to Katie, your question, that can be really intimidating when you're jumping into an interview. It's not like, hey, here's the exact job I'm going for, and I've designed a resume, and I know all my experiences lead to that. I did talk to somebody, gosh, a month or so ago, who was a constant bridesmaid. He was a silver medalist. He kept getting the interview and then not getting hired. And he said, "Hey, could I just get your advice on what I need to be doing differently?" And I talked to him for a little while, and his lack of confidence, and because he didn't know what he wanted to do, was just shining through. He was sort of saying, "Hey, I don't know who would hire me. There's other people who've got more relevant experience, and I'm just not sure where to go." So the first thing, informational interview or hardcore interview, you kind of know the questions that you're going to get asked. They're going to ask you, tell me about a time when you've gotten through adversity. Tell me about a time when you've heard some tough news, and how have you responded to feedback. They're going to ask you, what do you want to do? They're going to ask. So the first thing you need to do is get really good with role playing. I know a lot of you are athletes. You go to practice, you practice before the game, role play your interviews, and figure out what your strengths are. If you're really good at building relationships and you're extroverted and you want people to know that, make sure you've got 2 or 3 stories lined up that are going to help articulate what that is and why you're great at building relationships and how that's helped you. Beyond that, though, and I know you said informational interviews, so I want to stay there for a minute. Do the research to go look at the mission, vision, values of the company, and go look at the LinkedIn profile of the person you're meeting, and jot down a few questions that are going to help you understand what questions you ought to ask him or her that are going to help you understand that career path. And I say that not to say that you still shouldn't be ready with your examples and your story. And you've got to get really good at that story. I love hearing that you've got to figure out how to be different. And sometimes, you may not have the exact experience, but you want people to know you are a relentless learner. You're going to figure it out. You are somebody who gets things done. All right. This is the stuff I look for when I'm hiring somebody. I want somebody who's not going to make excuses and they're going to get things done. So tell me about the ways in which you've done that. You're super curious. You're going to figure out the answer to problems, and you're a great teammate. Like that's the stuff that I'm really looking for. And that's what most employers are looking for. And so, I would just be super tight with those answers and the stories that back it up. And I think you'll be really impressive. And then the last thing I'll say, which is probably unpopular to some degree, it's unpopular with my kids, but I think we worry a lot more about when we work and where we work than why we work. And I think why is everything. And when you're in your 20s, this may not be true for everyone, but it was for me. I didn't have a lot outside of work that was a pressing obligation. I had lots of friends. I wanted to get to happy hour. I wanted to do other things. But it was a time where I could really invest a lot of time in work. I'm not promoting FaceTime. I'm not telling you, you should be there just because, but I think you can differentiate yourself by working really hard. And part of your brand should always be, I'm gonna work until the job's done. I'm not watching the clock. I'm somebody here who is going to be different. And that's the person that I want to hire. So.
Yeah, that's really huge because in your 20s, it's your chance to sprint. And if you sprint well, when you're 25, 26, you're managing everybody. You're leading, you're getting the better accounts. You're in a position where companies are bribing to get you because you've got that experience. Or your first 5 years, you can play and kind of lightly do it and say, I want this, I want that, and I'm not up for that. And then you're 25 and you're starting over like you're 22 again. So you have to get through the entry level portion no matter what. So it's kind of your choice on how you build your brand. So Andy, I'm a big believer in what you're saying there. And then just a couple other points that he made that I think is so important. So Aiden, for instance, I'm going to call you out for a second, wants to do an internship, potentially Charlotte, where she's from, potentially Force Management, where John Kaplan, he founded the company, he transitioned somebody else as a president, but they might have internships there. So the advice that Andy's given, and is anybody else talking to a networking call that could potentially lead? I think Jeremy, Tommy with Jeremy, but I just want you guys to picture somebody you might be talking to that could have an opportunity for you. So what Andy said is, one, go to the website, look at their mission, vision, values. Like that's important to them. Like, what do they stand for? And then connect any story to that. So if it's a faith-based organization, you've got a strong faith, talk about church. If it's a organization that believes in integrity and honesty, talk about, when you're playing golf and, whatever the story may be, but there's a story that resonates when you're looking at their vision, mission, values. Look at the job description. And when you're looking at any job that they have, because most of the jobs that you're going to get actually aren't even posted. It is awful when you post a job. So now we're in this Revel search is an executive search company. So we post a job, we get over like 600 resumes. And so, we're just a couple of people. We can't, Tracy knows this. We can't talk to everybody. So a lot of times companies don't even post what's open because we have a flood of resumes. So there's a lot of things that are open that you don't even know about. Go to any job description and see how they explain it, just to think of better questions. Or think of a story of what question they could ask you based on how they talk about their experience. And then the last thing is just be memorable. Like we can open up the doors to anyone, but it's up to you to get the second meeting. So you did well if they're like, let's meet again in a week, or let me introduce you to somebody. But one networking call should lead to the next introduction. So those are just a few things. Andy, I don't know if you have some comments on that, but I feel like that you're dropping some good advice there.
Yeah, I think on the vision, mission, values sort of stuff. I mean, the other thing you can do, I love the idea of connecting your story to it, but you could just ask them about it as well. And so at Allegis Group, we talked a lot about opportunity and helping people realize their potential. And if somebody came into an interview or somebody called me and said, hey, I see you're really about helping people realize their potential and opportunity, that's important to me. How does that show up in what you do every day? Or how does that affect the way you think about the business? That's a topic I'm super excited to talk about. And again, I'm remembering that you did enough to look that up. And I'm likely you're going to stand out. You're just going to stand out. You're going to be a little bit different. You got to show the work there.
Yeah. A little bit of effort makes a huge difference to stand out, and it makes them that much more. You can have a great call, or you can have an even better call. Now you have a champion, and that champion's going to help you get their job or introduce you to more people. So, all right. I always hate that these interviews are so short, but we're going to say thank you to our guest speakers, and I appreciate you guys both being here.